Welcome back to the Scrubbed In series. I'm your host, Tarek Resat. In today's episode, we dive into something we feel in healthcare, but rarely name, the uncomfortable truth that food is making us sick, and yet medicine has stayed largely silent. I'm joined by Dr. Marion Nestle, a professor emerita at NYU, a pioneering voice in food politics and the author of multiple best-selling books, including Food Politics, Unsavory Truth, and What to Eat. Marion has spent her career exposing how corporate influence shapes our diets, distorts nutrition science, and keeps harmful products in circulation. But today, we're asking a slightly different question. Why has the healthcare system been so passive in the face of it all? Why do hospitals, doctors, and the public health institutions focus on treating diet-related illness rather than preventing it at the source? And if we do start to push back, what does that actually look like? Marion, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure.
It is very interesting to think of food as being political. What does that mean?
Everything about food is political, in part because it's an industry that generates a couple of $1 trillion a year just in the United States. So there's an enormous amount of money involved. And every producer of a food wants to be able to sell as much of that food as possible and make as much money on that food as possible without being very much concerned about the consequences, because that's not an issue for their stockholders. And agriculture is a big part of the economy, and food affects climate change. Lots of people don't have enough to eat. A lot of people have more than enough to eat and have chronic diseases that are related to diet. I mean, in every possible way in which you could think about food, from production to consumption and everything in between, politics gets involved. And, I wrote a book called Food Politics in 2002. It's come out in subsequent editions, but when I wrote that book, I thought I was just describing the obvious. It never occurred to me that everybody wasn't thinking this way, but it turns out not everybody was thinking this way. But I hardly ever get asked anymore, what does food have to do with politics? It was a question that got asked a lot in around 2002 when I wrote that book. But now we have RFK Jr. and nobody asks me that anymore.
He's taking care of that part now.
That's right.
Now, do you think the food industry is what, since I'm a physician, my interest about food and healthcare, do you think that the food industry has made the healthcare so passive in tackling the food policies, especially when it is affecting our general health?
I think it's very hard for people to understand that the food industry is not a benign force that just provides lots and lots of foods that everybody likes to eat. The food industry is a business like any other business. Food companies have stockholders to please. And the way that the American investment system works is that you not only have to make a profit if you're a business, but you have to grow your profit every 90 days and report growth to Wall Street. And if you don't, the stockholders get very cross. And so the way I like to put it is that food companies are not social service agencies and they're not public health agencies. They're businesses like any other business. And the way the United States investment system works is that stockholders come first, above all other considerations and priorities. That it hasn't always been that way. It started it really went into effect in 1981, which, coincidentally or not, and I think not, was exactly the same time that the prevalence of obesity started to rise. And I attribute that rise to the efforts of food companies to try to sell their product in an extremely competitive food environment in which all of a sudden the number of calories in the food supply had gone from 3,200 per capita to 4,000 per capita. And in that 20-year period, The calories in the food supply went up. People ate more. People got fatter, and stockholders got richer.
Wow. Now, I like how you're describing that the food industry is not a passive force, but it seems like it's actively doing what it's doing without regards to the consequences for the general public health.
Well, it's not an issue for them. The only issue is they could be selling widgets from the standpoint of stockholders. The only thing that the stockholders care about is profits. And growing profits. And that's very difficult to do because the 4,000 calories that are available per capita, and that means food produced in the United States, less exports plus imports, divided among the population, men, women, little tiny babies.
Everyone.
4,000 calories available is twice what the population needs. So if you're a food company trying to sell a product in that environment, you got a lot of work to do. And the food industry, I don't think that food industry executives were sitting around conference tables saying, how are we going to make Americans fat? They were sitting around a conference table saying, how are we going to sell our food
more money?
And make more money in this terribly competitive environment in which there's way too much food available. So they found ways to get people to eat more. And they created what, as a normal consequence of doing business, they created what I call an eat more food environment, which is one in which food is available everywhere,
without
every
the need.
place, 24/7 in very large quantities and at not very high expense for most people. And that's those are all incentives to people to eat more. And we're human. When we're given incentives, we follow.
We like to eat. What I'm afraid of is in a decade from now, the food industry will target us with 5,000 calorie daily intake.
Yes, and then we'll eat even more.
Now, this is an interesting also thing to know, that how active is the food industry in shaping our food or nutritional plans. Do you think that the general public does not know about that because there is lack of education, media coverage about it?
Well, I think you just don't think. You go to a supermarket to buy foods you like, you don't think that every single thing in the supermarket has a budget plan behind it. There is no accident about where a single product is placed, because the companies pay slotting fees to the grocery stores to get their foods attractively positioned. They're advertised. You don't see what goes on behind the scene. You don't see the kinds that you love. The commercials, food commercials are cute and they're a lot of fun. You don't think about them as marketing. You think about them as entertainment. And you don't see the enormous marketing effort that goes behind every product. Because if a supermarket has the product, there's an advertising budget behind it. And it's hard to get products in supermarkets without spending a lot of money. So you don't see that. That's not part of the normal consumer experience. You don't think about the lighting. You don't think about the traffic patterns. You might occasionally get annoyed that if you go to a store to get milk, you got to walk through the whole bloody store to get it. And it never occurs to you that that's done deliberately to get you to go through the whole store, because the more products you're exposed to, the more impulse buys
You're in the buying.
you have. And I think even if you know about these things, it's hard to think about them when all you want to do is get your groceries
Buy
and
the
get
milk.
out of there.
I mean, food.
Or order them online, or however you're doing it. It's the same thing. When you go online, there's a reason why certain products appear first.
Right.
It's not a coincidence, and it's not random.
So it seems food is getting more scary when eating should be a very peaceful and easy thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people worry a lot about what they're eating, because it's fair. Putting food in your body is a very intimate experience.
Definitely.
And so you should worry about it. But food is one of life's greatest pleasures. And it's Food is fun.
Tell me about it. Yes, all the pizzas and the pastas. Now, I saw that you wrote something about avocados and industry-funded nutrition science. Tell me, how do these things intersect, and why should be aware of that?
I write a daily blog 5 times a week at foodpolitics.com, and on Mondays I post something funny about food marketing, and usually conflicts of interest. And I'm very interested in the way that industry funds research to try to demonstrate that its products have special health benefits or aren't harmful, or whatever the product is. And I think this is research that would never get done if a food company or a food trade association wasn't paying for it. Nobody would ever do these studies because they make no sense. And so I find one, that I think is funny and post it. I think they're all funny, so I find them very entertaining. So this was an a study funded by the Haas Avocado Board, which funds research to demonstrate the benefits of avocados. I guess the avocado sellers are worried that people are going to think that avocados are fattening and not eat them. And never mind the destruction of land in Mexico or whatever, and all of the other problems that come with that. But it isn't just avocados. It's every food you could possibly think of is funding research to try to prove that the product is a superfood or that it's harmless. And is going to make you fat, and it's going to make you smart. It's going to reduce your heart disease risk. I mean, these are all one food studies. And if you give it a minute's thought, you know that one food can't possibly
give you all
that
these things
much difference in your diet. But that's what food companies want you to do, so that you'll pick up their product and buy it instead of somebody else's, or in addition to somebody else's.
In a way, that creates some sort of, public and even clinical confusion, with all these industry-backed research findings and discoveries, and how each different foods are healthy and beneficial and all of that.
Well, yes, and particularly because industry-funded studies almost invariably come out with results that favor the sponsor's interest. What a coincidence!
What a coincidence!
And they do that. I mean, these food trade associations or boards will send out a request for proposal saying, we're looking for proposals for research that will demonstrate the benefits of our product for heart disease, cognition, child health. I mean, whatever it is that they're looking at, and they're not going to fund proposals that don't have a good chance of doing that.
Right.
So investigators will write proposals that have a good chance of showing that.
Now, shouldn't be there regulation from the USDA or any public agency when it comes to these industry sponsored studies? Because in a way, that is actively creating that confusion and the negative health consequences.
And which agency would you suggest do that? No, there isn't any. Researchers are on their own, and the one thing that the most scientific journals have done is to require the investigators to disclose who funded their studies, which is where I get my data from. So that they do say, and they almost invariably say, this is sponsored by the Haas Avocado Board. The board had no input into the design, conduct,
definitely,
or interpretation of the study. Yeah, right. They don't have to, because they're not going to fund studies that aren't going to give them the answer that they want.
And that leads me to the following point. Now, with all of that, we have reached all that, huge and surplus of calories that we intake here in the U.S. that has created obesity as a national crisis, and many health consequences, medical or surgical, come after obesity because of all the the terrible that we have. how should, and that cost us billions of dollars in taxpayers' money, shouldn't be regulation, especially now the government is trying to, cut budgets and make stricter controls in a way to save all that money from healthcare that is related to the bad food industry, to say?
Well, it's very confusing because on the one hand, you have the Make America Healthy Again uh, commission, which just come out with a report. And on the other hand, you have the administration cutting all of the public health infrastructure in the United States. It's very hard to put those two things together. And I find it very confusing. On the one hand, they're saying we need to do something about chronic disease, especially in children. On the other hand, all of the apparatus that's available for doing anything about chronic disease is being decimated or cut completely. So I'm very curious to see how the administration expects to do this, and we won't know that for another several months until the next report comes out. That will be the action plan. I'm very eager to see the action plan. I don't know how you do this kind of action without having people to do it.
Right. In the past, we've had, I'm going to draw, similarities to the tobacco industry. In the past, we had studies showing that cigarettes were fine, they were unharmful, and then, science showed that was otherwise, and then, we had regulations and stricter control over tobacco selling to everyone. Do you think there should be something like that when it comes to food, especially to ultra-processed foods?
Oh, absolutely. I think regulation is the only way. You can't expect food companies to do anything voluntarily that will reduce their profits because their stockholders will get cross, and that's an unreasonable expectation. And in fact, every attempt to get food companies to do anything voluntarily has ended with them not doing anything voluntarily. So yeah, we need regulation. Is this administration going to do it? I don't think so.
Probably not.
We'll see. We'll see.
We'll see.
I hope I'm wrong.
Do you see a future where there will be regulations on ultra-processed foods?
Absolutely. But not in this administration.
Not anytime soon.
Maybe. We'll see. We'll see. I'm trying to stay open-minded.
I mean, this administration loves, balancing their budget. So I think they should see the health consequences and what that costs compared to.
Yeah, you would think so, but they've created a situation at NIH, for example, in which the leading researchers on these kinds of issues have been forced out or fired. And in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the main office that was working on chronic diseases, it's been closed or everybody's been fired. So it's very difficult. To put all this together into some coherent way of looking at it. I think what the Make America Healthy Again people are doing is very interesting and exciting in a lot of ways, but I don't see how their agenda can be carried out when there's nobody there to carry it out. And the idea that you're going to recruit large numbers of first-class scientists and first-class physicians and epidemiologists to come in and work in a system in which they can be fired at whim when they're not being paid very much seems quite unrealistic. One of the reasons why all those people were working for the government is that they wanted to do good work and do useful, meaningful work, and were willing to sacrifice a high salary for job stability and benefits and all of those other things. If you don't have those, then why would you want to do it? And working for industry where the pay is better seems attractive to a lot of people.
Definitely.
So I just don't understand the logic behind what's going on now. Even though I think what the Make America Healthy Again movement is doing is very interesting.
So I was thinking about this the other day. if in a way we're gonna, tell people don't try ultra processed foods or don't try foods that are very high in calories, it's bad for your health. But in a way, we're having some sort of, paternalistic approach, or we're kind of telling people what they should not do. Where is the ethical line in between, advising them for a healthier food options and also giving them the option to choose whatever they want from food terms?
Well, you have to do a lot of it has. I mean, the education is involved, but we know that education doesn't change people's behavior on its own. You always need to have other kinds of policies along with education to make education work. So, one obvious one is to make healthier food cheaper and more widely available. That's not what we have now. Right now, ultra processed foods are the cheap foods. And for people who don't have very much money, who are at highest risk for these conditions, and most at risk for poor health outcomes generally, you want to make sure that they're fabulously well educated. You want to make sure they have enough money to buy healthy foods. You want to make sure their kids are fed beautifully in schools. And that's not where current policies are going. When it seems to me those are the obvious policies. You want to make sure people have housing, that they have clean air and water. You want to get rid of the chemicals in the water supply. I'm all for that. Let's get those organic chemicals out of the drinking water. That would be healthier for everybody. But I don't see efforts from this administration to go after what public health people will cause the root causes of a lot of these problems. That's not happening. And in fact, the opposite is happening. The Environmental Protection Agency is removing some of its restrictions. That's going to make things worse.
Yeah, definitely. Let's say we're in a perfect world scenario where we're having all these regulations and stricter controls on all these ultra processed foods and more regulations on the food industry that kind of limits or makes people are more aware of the health consequences of the food choices they have. The other side of the thing is, we want people to have better access to healthy food, which, nowadays, if you want to go to any of those grocery stores that sells, food under the labels of organic or being healthy, they're relatively more expensive or difficult to afford. So even if we solve that side of the problem, how are we going to address the other side of the equation?
Obviously, you put the subsidies for healthier foods rather than unhealthy foods. I mean, the policy implications of the findings of the Maha Commission are pretty obvious. How they're going to do that, I have no idea. I think we need an agricultural system that's focused on public health, that produces food for people instead of what it's currently doing, which is feed for animals and, heaven help us, fuel for automobiles. The idea that half the corn supply is going to make ethanol fuel for automobiles is just shocking to me.
Definitely.
That's not helpful at all. And but that means taking on the ethanol industry. And if you want to get PFAS out of the food supply, you've got to turn off the sources of agricultural and other kinds of industrial pollution and make them clean up the effluents that they're releasing into the water, land, and air. And they don't want to do that because it costs a lot. They have to, you have to get industry to pay for what are called the externalized costs of what they're producing, which is the cost of cleaning up the environment and the health cost of what they're producing. And they don't want to do that. Their stockholders don't like it. So we keep coming back to that, but that's the basis of the difficulty, as far as I can tell. That until the investment system changes, and of course we get money out of politics, which would be nice. Then we don't elect public health officials who are interested in public health.
Right. How do you see the food industry in the U.S. compared to other parts of the world, like in Europe and in South America?
I don't know anything about the food industry in Europe. I mean, it's just like the one here, except the pressures to make money aren't as great. They're just not as great. So they still have to make money, but they don't have to be quite so greedy.
Okay, that's at least partially good.
Yeah, well, I mean, the society is, and also corporations pay higher taxes.
Right,
So, and rich people pay higher taxes. So the focus is a little bit different there. The standards are higher. Um, but our American companies sell products all over the world,
right,
everywhere. And people all over the world want American products because they have the aura of America, which a lot of people thought or used to think was pretty terrific. I don't know what they think now. Um, so it's, corporations are supposed to make money. That's their fundamental purpose.
right. And now, do countries like in Europe or in South America have any better regulations in terms of controlling targeting of ultra processed foods to the kids
Oh,
or the
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the countries in Latin America in particular looked at the rising prevalence of obesity and said, uh-oh, we're in trouble. Obesity is an enormous risk factor for type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is a terrible disease. We don't have a healthcare system that can
Afford
cope
it. Mm-hmm.
or afford it. It can't cope with it. It can't afford it. We should try to prevent as much type 2 diabetes as possible. Let's start by putting warning labels on ultra-processed foods. And so that's how they started. Was with first it was taxes on sugar sweetened beverages, warning labels on ultra processed foods, restrictions on marketing of ultra processed foods with warning labels to children. If they had a warning label, you can't market it to kids. Removal of cartoons from the front of packages that are marketed to kids if they're ultra processed. Not allowing ultra processed foods with warning labels to be sold in schools. So various countries have enacted various combinations of those kinds of regulations. They're being evaluated very carefully, and the evaluations show that those kinds of measures reduce purchases. What they have been unable to show so far is that they reduce obesity. That's a much more complicated problem, because if you want to reduce obesity, then you have to talk about housing, air, water, chemicals, and lots of other things besides food.
And we've been slow in adopting these changes here in the US because of
We're not slow. We're not doing
we're
it.
not doing it even. And that's because of how strong is the food industry here.
Well, it's strong enough to stop any of that.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's been interesting to me to see the opposition to the Maha Commission report is pretty noisy.
Yeah.
And we'll see where that goes.
Do you see that the healthcare system need to take more active role in playing a role in regulating the food policy, not just being a governmental position or stance?
Well, I don't see that. First of all, we don't have a healthcare system, so let's start with that. The I don't know what your particular medical practice is like, but I can tell you that as a patient, I have, if I'm lucky, 15 minutes with a physician, and the physician is on a computer for 10 of those minutes.
True.
Food is not an issue because there's absolutely no time to do anything in that amount of time. It's in and out. So this is a dysfunctional healthcare system in which no physician has the possibility of talking to patients about diet. It would cost too much. Because it's hard to talk to patients about diets. It takes quite a bit of time. They have to trust you so that they tell the truth. And you have to be able to ask questions that will elicit real information. That takes a lot of time to do. The best you can do is to refer patients to a nutritionist or dietitian if you're lucky enough to have one, and if you're lucky enough to have one who's good and is capable of doing this. So it's not an option. And there are physicians who are very interested in nutrition. They tend to belong to the College of Lifestyle
Lifestyle.
Medicine. Yeah, they're pretty great, those people. And they somehow manage their practices so that they have time to talk to patients about their lifestyles. But for normal practices, it's not an option.
Not an option.
Well, if they knew anything about nutrition in the first place, which of course they don't.
That too, yeah. Yeah, I mean, in all my years of training and education, I don't think nutrition was anything that was actively educated or passed on to us.
Well, you don't do anything about prevention because it takes too long. And it's considered to be too expensive, because if you did prevention for everybody, it would cost more than treating individuals. I mean, the whole thing is a mess.
Definitely, yeah. So what do you see is the solution to this real entire big crisis? Is it the only way to fix it is to get rid of the food industry?
No, the way to do it is to get money out of politics.
Okay.
No, I mean, we need an electoral system in which everybody who runs for office has the same amount of money to spend while they're campaigning, and it's publicly funded, and people talk about real issues.
Right. Yeah. And something that I noticed in my practice as well is the discrepancy in the nutrition between people who are from minority backgrounds compared to the more general population. You feel like there is a two-tier nutritional system going on, one targeting.
Oh, absolutely, but it's not minority, it's class-based. It has to do with how much money people have. No, because it's expensive to eat healthfully. And food companies target their junkiest products to the poorest people.
Interesting.
Because even poor people have enough money to buy their products.
Junky food. Wow.
Yeah. So, and it tastes good and people like it. It's formulated to make people like it, and people like it.
Yeah, I'm curious about the part that food is formulated to make people like it more.
Well, yeah, they're not going to. It's a lot of research goes into creating snack foods, cereals, packaged foods of various kinds. A lot of research goes into it. And the object of the game is to get people to love it so much that they order it again and again and again. And that once they start eating, they can't stop. So, and much research goes in to those kinds of formulations. And it has to do with the way the food looks, the way it tastes, its texture in the mouth, how it makes you feel, and and anything that that's why there's so much fuss about food colors right now, because if you take the colors out of those cereals, they don't taste as good.
Really?
It's not that they have any taste; it's just that you perceive them as tasting better if they're brightly colored.
That's another technology that the government should, better control
Absolutely.
And regulate.
Will it do that? We'll see.
Probably not. Not anytime soon, as you're saying.
I don't know. We'll find out.
If you were to rebuild our food system with access at the center, what would that look like?
Well, I'd have an agricultural system I'd start with agriculture and have an agricultural system that produces food for people, as I said, rather than animals. And, I don't mind feeding animals, but we don't have to use half the food supply to feed animals. And certainly there's plenty of room to grow food if you're not using half your corn supply for ethanol. So a much greater production would reduce the cost of that. Somehow you would have to figure out how to pay farmers a decent living and farm workers a decent living as part of that. But that would be part of creating a food system that's functional. Would be to have an agricultural system that pays everybody in it what they what they need and what they deserve, and the And maybe if you paid high enough wages, Americans would work on farms. I know lots of people who want to farm, but the land's too expensive and they can't afford it. So there are lots of ways in which we could change this system to make it better. And then I would stop marketing, stop food companies from marketing foods to kids at all. No marketing to kids, particularly of junk food. Oh, warning labels, absolutely. Taxes on sodas, absolutely. I mean, there's lots and lots of things that we could do to create a system that promoted healthier diets without having to beat individuals over the head about it. It would just become easier and less expensive for them to eat healthfully than it would for them to eat unhealthfully. That would be ideal. I get to have ideas.
So we need the government to help the farmers to start with. And we need...
I'm afraid so. I don't know how else we could do it.
Right. Now, why only stop targeting the kids? Why also not adults?
Well, you want to start with kids. So in some ways, adults are hopeless. So you want to start with kids and give them first of all, their obesity is rising very rapidly among children.
Right.
And you want to stop that as much as possible. And certainly within my lifetime, the difference is so obvious. When I went to school and when my kids went to school, there were hardly any overweight kids. Kids were outside playing all day long. They weren't on their phones. And,
watching, playing all the time.
That's an enormous societal change, and its implications are only now being understood right from the beginning. And and some of this has to be reversed, which is very difficult. So the school system needs to change to encourage kids to be more active in some way. School food has to be much better. There are all kinds of things that I think would make very significant differences if we did them. And we could do them if we had the political will.
The power to do them. And how do you see the soda tax making a difference?
Well, that reduces that makes it more expensive. And so people buy less of it. Supply and demand. It's really simple. You raise the price and people decide that they're only going to buy them for occasional treats. They're not going to have the table on. They're not going to have them on the table all day long. Sodas are easy. They're sugars and water and nothing else. They're in large quantities. They're demonstrably bad for health. They really mess up metabolism. And they should only be consumed in small quantities, if at all. Nobody cares about the 8-ounce sodas. It's the bigger ones.
Diet and non-diet, both are alike.
Well, I don't know. The diet ones are complicated, and the research is still out on that. But I don't think they're healthy.
Now, you said they miss the metabolism. What do you mean, or in what way?
Well, if you dump a lot of sugar into your system in liquid form, it requires a lot of insulin to take care of it. Your metabolism doesn't like that.
The sugar spikes.
Yeah, that's a big spike.
Indeed.
For a long time. It's not a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you, Marion, for your time with us and for sharing all this information about how food is scary or getting scary nowadays and how it should be in an ideal world where we have a better political and financial power to protect healthy food, I would say.
Wouldn't that be nice?
That would be amazing. You've spent your life exposing the structures behind our broken food system, but today you helped us see something else too, and what healthcare should be doing for better food policies. And maybe it's time to take action and start doing the change now before it's too late for our general public health. Before we close, any final messages you would like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, enjoy your food. It's one of life's greatest pleasures.
I mean, I'm not sure if I'll be enjoying food or I'll be more careful with it nowadays.
Eat real food.
Eat real food. I'll try. Yeah. And that's a wrap for this episode of the Scrubbed In series. Marion, you're officially scrubbed in. To everyone listening, Stay curious, stay driven, and stay bold enough to reimagine what's possible in healthcare. I'm your host, Tarek Resat, signing off.
Nice.
Thank you very much.